as a genre has been around for over 100 years now, and each era has brought us different kinds of monsters and villains. In the 30s and 40s, we had the classic Universal monsters, then the 50s pushed sci-fi nightmares into the mainstream, while the 60s and 70s slowly dragged horror towards slashers, psychological terror, and more grounded human monsters. But when John Carpenter made Halloween and gave us Michael Myers in the late 70s, he didn't know that he was making history and changing how horror movies would be made for the next 20 years. In the 80s and the 90s, we not only got slashers like Freddy, Pinhead, Jason, and Leatherface, but also aliens like The Thing. Even Stephen King's villains got their fair share of fame during this time, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. That's why, in this video, we're going to rank the most terrifying villains from the 80s and 90s. Of course, this is just how we look at these villains, and if you feel like moving somebody up or down the list, we'd be happy to hear your opinion in the comment section down below. But for now, let's get started. Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Frederick Charles Krueger is the stuff of nightmares, quite literally, because he haunts and hunts you while you sleep. When he was alive, he used to kill children, and once people found out about that and killed him right back, he became a malevolent spirit who once again targeted young people in their dreams. Of course, the effects of these hauntings could be felt in real life, and tormenting people became his day or night job. But the thing is, Freddy's future and fate had been written even before he was born, at least according to later franchise lore. Freddy's mother, Amanda Krueger, later known as Sister Mary Helena, worked as a nun at the Old Hathaway House, which was an asylum for the criminally insane. In the later mythology, she was accidentally locked inside with violent inmates, repeatedly assaulted, and later gave birth to Freddy. The franchise also presents him as being adopted by Edward Underwood, an abusive alcoholic, which only made things worse for him. So, Freddy became known through the infamous Son of 100 Maniacs origin, and then he went on to become the ward of a terrible man. No wonder he turned out to be such a mess, both in life and in death, but we have to admit, he's a man of his own making, and his past can't justify or whitewash anything he's done. Freddy is essentially a sadistic psychopath who's driven by a singular desire to kill. He enjoys fear in his victims before the kill, and in order to do that, he spends time twisting a victim's dreams, then strikes when they're broken or at their worst or weakest. But what about his own strength and powers? Later sequels add that he gets them from the dream demons, who made him a force to reckon with. Although he cracks jokes and tries to act all bombastic, it's clear that he has a bit of a god complex. He uses his clawed gloves, but his real weapon is the dream world itself, which often changes according to his whims. He can possess people as well, and although he becomes mortal and killable in the waking world, he's still quite a risk. And probably the only major weakness that Freddy has is that if he's forgotten, he can't stay active. He needs people to remember him and fear him in order to keep killing. Michael Myers, Halloween 2, 1981. Michael Myers first appeared in John Carpenter's original Halloween movie in 1978, but then went on to become a horror phenomenon through the 80s, 90s, and even today. He's someone who inspired numerous other slashers, and it seems the appeal that Michael has comes from how little insight he offers you about himself. Well, most slashers tend to be humanized through a bad childhood. Michael's case is different because he was evil from a tender age. At just 6 years old, he murdered his older sister Judith in cold blood on Halloween night, and after that, he was locked away in a mental institution, namely Smith's Grove Sanitarium. He spent 15 years there, but never once forgot his objective, his pull towards violence and death. Eventually, he found a way to escape, after which he went back home to Haddonfield, Illinois, and began to stalk and murder people in his hometown. And this became an unwanted Halloween tradition for Haddonfield residents. What makes Michael so scary is that there's no clear emotional doorway into him. In Halloween 2, it was revealed that Michael was actually after his youngest sister, Laurie Strode, so she became his target, his enemy. Of course, horror fans should remember that this sister twist only applies to certain Halloween timelines because later continuities, especially the 2018 sequel timeline, ignore that connection entirely. Michael's other major enemy was Dr. Samuel Loomis, Michael's psychiatrist from Smith's Grove. But the thing with Michael Myers is that he doesn't strike anyone as a normal person who happens to have a grudge. In fact, Loomis once described him as pure evil in human form. This is the reason why Michael is the worst of the human killers. He has no reason to kill, and yet he does. Maybe he kills because that's what he is. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a personality. All you need to do is read his actions and you'll see that Michael is sadistic, patient, and cruel in a very deliberate fashion. He doesn't always grant his victims the luxury of a quick death. He seems to enjoy fear before the kill, like when he wears a ghost costume and Linda's boyfriend's glasses, letting her believe she's safe before strangling her with a telephone cord. Now, that's pretty far from just regular old violence. That, my friends, is a sick little performance. His bond with Halloween Night is also pretty strange. In the 1981 film, he writes Samhain in blood, which is basically a reference to the ancient roots of the holiday. Perhaps in his mind, Halloween is more than just a date. It might be his ritual. The Thing, 1982. The Thing, from John Carpenter's cinematic masterpiece, was actually the primary villain of John W. Campbell's 1938 novella, Who Goes There? And while there have been a few iterations of The Thing, the 1982 version is definitely the scariest. As for the creature itself, it appears to have crash-landed on Earth thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years ago, and then got stuck in the Antarctic ice before being excavated by some unfortunate Norwegian researchers. It's believed that it also assimilated the crew of the ship on which it arrived on Earth, but how does this thing take over? Well, every part of the thing can potentially function as a separate organism. The bigger the cell complex, the more the intelligence, so each part of it can act as a life form, affect a victim, consume a body, and create more things through assimilation. That means the creature has no true form, at least not one that's canon. Often, the thing appears as whoever it's copied. In nature, it's an ambush predator, in the sense that it isolates a target, takes their body, and assumes their form, but when exposed, or when the host body takes fatal damage, the creature drops its disguise to reveal this, well, super ugly cluster and web of tendrils, claws, mouths, and whatever else can help it survive. Furthermore, since severed parts of it can still live on their own, just killing the body in a normal sense won't do the job. You have to destroy it down to the cellular level, which is why incineration works best. And you have to remember, the thing's survival instincts are more resolute than Michael's obsession with Laurie Strode. It can even attack another manifestation of itself if that helps avert suspicion. Let's say a human has been assimilated, but someone discovers the truth. The thing can use different parts of its body to serve as individual entities in order to stay alive and safe. Like maybe your arm gets torn off and used as a weapon, while your leg separates from the main body and continues the attack in an individual capacity. Maybe some other body part goes into hiding for safety and further assimilation. As we mentioned earlier, its intelligence depends on size and form. Smaller pieces can be reckless, like Norris's mutated head, which exposes itself and gets burned. Larger, human-like forms are more cunning because the thing can use the memories and knowledge of those it's absorbed. I mean, how else could you explain it building a makeshift UFO? I'm sure the researchers from Antarctica didn't have the expertise to build a UFO from spare parts. The Blair thing had to have knowledge gained from its previous kills and assimilations. Despite all of this, the real reason it became a horror icon is paranoia. When the thing comes to your workplace, the thick line between friend and foe suddenly vanishes. Pinhead. Hellraiser, 1987. Pinhead is the most recognizable member of the Cenobites, who are tied to Clive Barker's mythology and sometimes described through the Order of the Gash. As for the Cenobites themselves, they're essentially extra-dimensional torturers who claim to have removed the distinction between pain and pleasure and offer others the same. More often than not, Cenobites are summoned by the sickest of folks who want physical pleasure that transcends any and all earthly pleasure. These people usually use something called the Lament Configuration, a mechanical puzzle box that summons the Cenobites when solved. What makes Pinhead scary is that he's not some huge, angry brute who relies on size. This guy is very lean, but he's also disturbingly intelligent and extremely powerful because of his supernatural nature. In a genre full of masked killers with machetes and heavy breathing, this guy speaks like an evil philosopher and often admits that he's a demon to some and an angel to others. The pins that decorate his skull are how he got his name, and his creator, Clive Barker, imagined him as an insane intellectual, someone who's fully aware that his actions are vile, yet he's never hesitant about executing them. He's cold, ruthless, and loyal to the creed of the Cenobites. In the first film, he appears for a very brief period and seems more neutral than the regular slashers we had during that time, but as the franchise continued, Pinhead started killing more often. Pinhead usually kills with hooked chains, which he summons and controls with his mind. These barbed iron hooks are powerful enough to pierce stone and concrete, which naturally means that tearing humans apart and restraining them is a piece of cake. Pinhead can also appear in hell and the physical world, and he can summon other Cenobites, but out of all the people on this list, I think the one person I'd never want to meet is Pinhead. Alien Queen. Aliens, 1986. The xenomorph queen is the mother and leader of all the aliens found in a particular hive. Also known as an alien queen or mother alien, she's the largest and smartest variant in a xenomorph hive, and in most cases, she's the mother of every drone and warrior because she's the one who lays the eggs. The whole hive economy not only runs through, but also depends on her because she protects the hive, guides its denizens to perform their respective tasks, and if she's dead, the entire hive falls into anarchy. You see, whatever anyone does in the hive is on her command, and without such command, shit goes to hell. A queen is nothing like a regular xenomorph. She's around 15 to 20 feet tall, and her body resembles a theropod dinosaur, unlike the drones who look like humanoid creatures. She has twin sets of arms, huge back legs, a stronger tail, and an inner jaw that can still do the usual xenomorph damage. Her head has a much larger brain case that's protected by that huge crest, and it's this crest that cements her royal image. Her most iconic feature, though, is the massive ovipositor in her lower body, which produces eggs from which the facehuggers come out. In moments of danger, like if one dedicated woman named Ellen Ripley threatened to torch the entire hive, the queen can detach from the ovipositor to protect the hive as she can grow a new one later. Intriguingly, for her appearance and the threat quotient, the queen mother is a fairly intelligent being, someone who's capable of even using human technology. On LV-426, she uses an elevator after she sees Ripley and Newt use one, and that's not animal instinct behavior if you think about it. So yeah, the xenomorph queen is not one to be trifled with. Chucky, Child's Play, 1988. Charles Lee Ray, better known as Chucky, used to be the Lakeshore Strangler and ultimately came to be called the Killer Doll. Now, we've seen innumerable dolls in horror movies, and Chucky is exactly that. He's basically a good guy doll possessed by the soul of a foul-mouthed murderer, thereby making a pretty strong argument against dolls as birthday gifts. Before the whole doll era started, Chucky was a psychopathic, sadistic, and extremely bad-tempered serial killer. After the police shot him in a toy store, he used voodoo to transfer his soul into the doll so that he could cheat death and eventually find a human body again. For a long time, this was his main goal. He would play the innocent best friend, stay dormant when needed, and then murder anyone who got in his way. But over time, he accepted the whole possessed doll situation and became a supernatural little menace. His power can be owed to an entity called Damballa, a spiritual force connected to the voodoo spell Chucky abuses. The interesting part is that the film treats this power as something Chucky misuses rather than something automatically evil by itself. And if we're to believe Chucky's former voodoo master, John Bishop, who's also known as Dr. Death, Bishop sees Chucky's actions as an abomination, like he's doing something blasphemous. As a killer doll, Chucky has little to no sense of guilt, and on top of that, he has a very extreme ego and an equally bad temper, in addition to a thing for cruelty and sadism. He holds grudges, betrays people, kills for fun, and even tried to corrupt his son Glenn because the poor kid didn't want to murder anyone. His family life is obviously a disaster. For instance, as far as his bae Tiffany Valentine is concerned, for her, he has love, abuse, murder attempts, sympathy, and more murder attempts. So yeah, Annabelle might be the most demonic doll ever, but Chucky, by far, is the most evil of the lot. Pennywise, It, 1990. Known as a glamour in Stephen King's mythology, It belongs to an ancient and obscure species of evil cosmic entities that feed on emotions like fear. And although this wasn't fully revealed in the 1990 installment, the creature makes its victims, especially children, afraid and scared because apparently that makes them taste better. This thing is like billions of years old and comes from the void-like cosmic realm connected to Todash darkness and the Macroverse, but the creature arrived on Earth millions of years ago to feed and made Derry its home. We're not going to get into the details of its backstory or how it was confined to Derry, but the creature eventually took on the persona of a clown named Pennywise the Dancing Clown and wakes roughly every 27 years for a feeding cycle. Now, the thing about It is that although it can hunt you down in a matter of minutes, it bides its time studying your fear and using it as bait. Children are its preferred prey because their fears are easier to exploit and also because they don't put up a good fight, unless of course they're the losers club. Now, because It is basically a super ancient cosmic aliens, humans can only comprehend its true form as something like a giant spider, but yeah, most of the time it meets and greets you as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Having said that, it can take any form it wants, and usually this form is based on the victim's worst fears. In King's novel, the losers face it as children in the late 1950s, then return as adults in the mid-80s. The 1990 miniseries keeps this dual timeline structure, but shifts the adult confrontation to 1990. Pennywise tries to devour the kids, but they survive and manage to partially defeat him. Then, 27 years later, after they've grown up, the losers return to Derry to face him again and avenge his victims. But for all of its powers and abilities, the creature becomes far less untouchable once its victims stop feeding it fear. Once you resist it and stand your ground, it starts losing the control that makes it so terrifying. In fact, its arrogance, immaturity, and need for attention pushed it to face all the losers together instead of killing them one by one, and that, thankfully, became its greatest mistake. Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th, the final chapter, 1984. Jason Voorhees is yet another horror icon whose childhood trauma played an integral part in shaping his adult undead life. The man is a large, deformed, monstrous serial killer with a hockey mask over his face, which serves a couple of purposes. First, it hides his face, and second, keeps people at bay because the hockey mask looks extremely intimidating. But even after this, if someone enters Jason's hunting grounds, they meet their maker in the worst possible ways. Now, the reason why Mr. Voorhees kills is because in his broken mind, this is vengeance. Vengeance for his own apparent death that was caused by negligence and cruelty at Camp Crystal Lake, and also for his dear old mom, Pamela Voorhees, whom he saw decapitated. When Jason was human, he was already absurdly durable and strong. He could feel pain though, and Tommy Jarvis finally brought him down with Jason's own machete in the final chapter. But this is Jason we're talking about, and in his case, death tends to be temporary. Years later, in Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, Tommy accidentally revived him through a lightning strike, and Jason returned as an undead revenant with supernatural strength and much higher durability. Ever since, he's been a tough bird to kill. His preferred weapon is the machete, with an axe as a close second, but Jason can turn almost anything nearby into a potential murder weapon. Bare hands also work fine because why not? Strength-wise, he can lift people off the ground, crush their heads, smash through walls, rip a man's heart out, basically the works. Jason treats human beings like ragdolls, and nothing short of decapitation or an equally potent attack has the ability to stop him. Jason has killed scores of people in his lifetime, and he has no qualms about violence, although I gotta say, unlike his peers Michael Myers or Freddy, Jason isn't usually portrayed as someone who deliberately targets young children or animals. It's for this strange sliver of horror movie restraint that we've brought him down slightly in the ranking. He's nice that way, at least as far as slasher standards go, but yeah, Jason is not to be trifled with, especially if you're a camp counselor, more so if you fool around at summer camps. Jack Torrance, The Shining, 1980. John Daniel Edward Torrance, aka Jack Torrance, is the primary villain from the 1980 film The Shining, and also Stephen King's novel of the same name, on which the film is based. Apart from these two, Jack Torrance has been mentioned in other installments of Stephen King's books and related media, and that's primarily because many of his stories are set in the same universe, which is why we also have Dick Hallorann connected to both The Shining and its stories. But I digress. The reason why Jack Torrance is so scary is because of what he's not. You see, unlike most people and creatures on this list, Jack is actually a family man. He has a wife, a kid, and the man wants to become a writer. What humanizes him more is the fact that he's a recovering alcoholic and someone who's fighting his own battles like most of us. And in order to support his family, he accepts the job of winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel. At the same time, Jack wasn't exactly a model husband or father and already had plenty of poison inside him. He brings along his wife, Wendy, and son, Danny, to the Overlook Hotel, but the hotel plays its tricks on Jack, and although his wife and son soon figure out that something is very wrong with the place, Jack stays in denial. He had been a raging alcoholic who was in recovery, but one night, after a fight caused by his own doing, he ends up saying that he would sell his soul for beer, and wouldn't you know it, Lloyd the bartender appears with fine alcohol, that too on the house. That drink breaks his months of abstinence, but more importantly, it brings about Jack's fall. It's not long after this that he begins his manhunt for his own wife and kid. Now, what Jack Nicholson did in the movie was legendary, and had it not been for him, maybe the character of Jack Torrance wouldn't have had such an appeal in pop culture. Furthermore, unlike the novel's Jack, who begins as flawed but more tragic, Kubrick's version of Jack is definitely more hostile from the start. He's a violent and abusive man with ugly, racist, and misogynistic traits, and he wasn't exactly averse to hurting his wife and child. So, once the hotel and its ghosts get their hooks in him, he becomes completely unhinged. Hannibal Lecter, The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Hannibal Lecter was born in Lithuania in 1933. His father was a Lithuanian count, while his mother was connected to Italian aristocracy, and as a child, Hannibal was very close to his younger sister, Misha. Now, his childhood backstory isn't the main focus of The Silence of the Lambs, but later books and adaptations, especially Hannibal Rising, expand on what happened to him in his youth. During the Second World War, everything came crumbling down around young Hannibal. His family was caught in the violence of the war, his parents died, and Hannibal and Misha were left alone in the ruins. What's even worse was that later material presents Hannibal as being forced into the horror of that cannibalistic act as well. This act would break the child in ways no one could fix. Although the tragedy that Hannibal experienced as a child explains his many wounds, it doesn't in any way excuse the monster he became. Lecter grew into a cannibalistic killer obsessed with taste, etiquette, and above all, control. In Silence of the Lambs, he had been captured and locked away, while another serial killer named Buffalo Bill began kidnapping women, killing them, and removing their skin. The FBI sent trainee Clarice Starling to interview Lecter, and he became fascinated with her almost at once. He gave her cryptic clues about Bill in exchange for painful memories from her childhood. Clarice used those clues to find Bill, but Lecter also used the situation for his own benefit and pulled off a bloody escape. After that, he left one letter for Clarice to wish her well and another for Chilton to promise revenge for years of mistreatment. Chilton disappeared not long after. Lecter is often called a pure sociopath, but the fact of the matter is that he is called so because there is no better, simple definition for who he truly is. He has no conscience and no remorse, but he's not shallow or petty. He's absolutely brilliant, tremendously well-cultured, and that's why all his violence is wrapped in manners. Hannibal prides himself on killing people with poor taste, bad manners, or moral cruelty, and later material makes him especially hostile towards predators because of Misha's murder. But make no mistake, Hannibal Lecter is pure evil. Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, 1986. Contrary to Hannibal, Leatherface is not a refined intellectual monster. The man is a chainsaw-wielding mess of all things unstable and lives in a house full of lunatics like him. He's also a cannibalistic serial killer who wears masks made from the flayed faces of his victims, and intriguingly enough, this character was partially inspired by Ed Gein, the real-life murderer and grave robber whose crimes influenced multiple horror villains. Anyways, across different franchise materials, Leatherface is usually presented as a large, physically imposing man, and some modern franchise material has linked his hulking frame to acromegaly. His size gives him an unfair advantage as well. He kills intruders who enter his family's territory, and although he can use different tools, the chainsaw is his weapon of choice. In the first film, he's ruthless, but not emotionless. He's visibly frightened when others enter his home, and at home he submits to his family. His older brother, the cook, abuses him and beats him with a broomstick, and Leatherface doesn't fight back. He cowers and takes it. Since he's nonverbal, his masks become his way of expression, so he basically wears masks that represent whatever he's feeling in that instant. In the second film, he's mostly the same, although he displays a strange bit of softness towards Vanita Stretch Brock, so much so that he develops a crush on her and even spares her life. First, he lies about killing her, and then he hides her from the rest of the Sawyer family, but that's about the entire emotional bandwidth Leatherface has. Turns out, the only good cannibal is a dead cannibal. Candyman. Candyman, 1992. Candyman is a terrifying monster, yes, but his origin is extremely tragic, probably the most tragic one on this list after Hannibal's. His story goes back to 19th century Chicago, where he was the son of a formerly enslaved man who became very wealthy after he invented a machine that mass-produced shoes during the American Civil War. With that money, his father sent him to the best schools in America, and the young man grew into a polite, good-natured gentleman and a respected painter. He was known for portraits that would capture a person's status. Around 1890, a wealthy landowner hired him to paint his daughter, a white woman, and the two fell in love. Of course, the father didn't take that well. So, like any self-respecting racist father from the 19th century, he hired a lynch mob and they chased the painter through the near north side of Chicago. After they overpowered him, they sawed off his right hand with a rusty blade, smeared his body with honey from a local apiary, and let the bees sting him to death, which is how he got his name, Candyman. His body was then burned on a pyre, and his ashes were scattered across the region. After such an unjust death, Candyman rose as a wrath-driven specter bound to the legend and the land where his story took root. Even as a deadly specter, Candyman is articulate, well-spoken, and intensely vain. Gemini Killer, Exorcist III, 1990. James Veneman, also known as the Gemini Killer, is the main villain of the Exorcist III Legion. In life, he was a ruthless serial killer, but in death, his soul was so rotten that, with help from Pazuzu, he became something far worse. Much like Chucky, he was already messed up and became even more messed up after death. Pazuzu's a bitch, let me tell ya. Anyways, the really messed up part happened around the same time Father Damien Karras died in the first story. While Karras kills himself, Veneman is executed, and Pazuzu, mad about his own defeat, transfers Veneman's soul into Karras' dead body. But Karras' brain and bone tissue were already damaged, so Veneman couldn't fully control the body. Locals later find Karras, and he ends up in a mental hospital, locked inside cell 11 for 15 years under the name Patient X. Then, one day, Patient X turns hostile and violent and starts calling himself the Gemini Killer. Next, the hospital becomes a full-blown moral disaster zone. Patients begin to murder people. I mean, that's not a murder anymore. That's evil art, the kind that would make Hannibal proud. Detective Kinderman arrives to investigate and notices that Patient X looks like his old friend, Damien Karras. Veneman later tries to kill Kinderman's daughter through one of the patients, fails, and then attacks Kinderman himself. Father Paul Morning tries to perform an exorcism, but Pazuzu intervenes and knocks him unconscious. Once Morning recovers, he pushes Karras to fight back from within, and it works. Karras asks Kinderman to shoot him, and after several shots, Veneman's soul is expelled. Then, Kinderman gives Karras a final mercy shot, thereby freeing him from pain, finally sending his soul to heaven. Annie Wilkes, Misery, 1990. Annie Wilkes is a severely mentally ill, demented, obsessive nurse who's the self-proclaimed biggest fan of the protagonist, Paul Sheldon. Annie was born in Bakersfield, California, and graduated from nursing school. In the novel, she's associated with the University of Southern California's nursing school in 1966, while the film version adjusts some of her background details. During her time as head maternity nurse at a Boulder, Colorado hospital, several infants under her care died under strange circumstances. She was later tried for those deaths, but the court acquitted her due to a lack of evidence. And then, Paul finds out that Annie's murder list is pretty long. Annie had killed several patients at other hospitals, and nobody noticed because many were already very sick or badly hurt. In the novel's scrapbook material, her suspected victim count is massive and may reach into the dozens, possibly around 70 depending on how the deaths are counted. She was also once married to a physical therapist named Ralph Dugan, who divorced her due to mental cruelty. That's gotta be the understatement of the century, because Ralph really got off easy if you ask us. Now, as described by forensic psychologist Dr. Reed Malloy in Analysis of the Character, Annie displays some signs of bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder, as well as other personality traits like obsessive compulsiveness, schizoid schizotypal, and sadomasochistic traits. She also appears psychotic, paranoid, and very unstable, with extreme mood shifts, long depressive spells, self-harm, suicidal thoughts on rainy nights, and violent rage. And yeah, although she kills people on a regular basis, she thinks of herself as a woman of God and doesn't even use profanity in her speech. Ghostface, Scream, 1996. Unlike the other entries on this list, Ghostface isn't one single killer. It's a fictional persona, a Halloween costume, and a mask that different people use to hide who they are. Across the franchise, many people have used the Ghostface identity, and that number gets even larger if we count the TV series continuity separately. In the Scream universe, the costume itself is not rare because just about anybody can get something that looks very much like it, which means the look stays basically the same regardless of who wears it. It's got the black hood, a black cloak with a jagged base, and the white mask with a black shroud sewn to the back with the expression that resembles a screaming ghost. Ghostface usually calls victims first, taunts them, threatens them, and uses a voice changer to hide their identity. Not a supernatural killer like Michael or Freddy, every Ghostface is actually just a human, but then again, somehow these human beings are capable of taking damage, hitting hard, and moving with serious stealth when the scene demands it. But yeah, given their human biology, they're far from invincible. In fact, they can even be clumsy, reckless, beaten back, and outsmarted. The Leprechaun, 1993. The Leprechaun from the 1993 film isn't a cute little gold hoarder from a children's book. Nope, this guy's sadistic, aggressive, bloodthirsty, demonic, and properly deranged. He wants mischief, death, ruin, and above all, his gold. Take his treasure, or try to keep it, and he sees that as a personal insult worthy of a murder spree. What makes him scary is how much fun he has with it. He often uses magic to kill people, and he adds gruesome poetry to the act. He's also provocative and deeply unpleasant, with moments across the series where his magic is used for cruel humiliation humiliation. Intriguingly, he was originally played by Warwick Davis, the same man who played the adorable Ewok Wicket and the brave Professor Flitwick from the Harry Potter series. Oh, and he also played Griphook. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like, subscribe, and share buttons because those small clicks from you will help us tremendously, bringing you more of these marvelous videos. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.